KATU Sports presents a special NBA Finals edition of the Rip City Wrap-Up right now.
The first NBA Finals game at Madison Square Garden in 27 years. We're taking a live look at the New York City skyline. Spurs pull one back Knicks now with the 2-1 series lead over San Antonio. This means we will have at least a Game 5 on Saturday. Good evening, and thanks for tuning in to the special edition of Rip City Wrap-Up. After the NBA Finals, Knicks on the driver's seat to get their third championship. Meanwhile, the Trailblazers hope to chase their second ring if they stay in Portland. I'm Guillermo Motta.
And I'm Wright, Gazaway. After Game 1 and 2 of the NBA Finals, we addressed the concerns surrounding the new ownership group and the public funding of a Moda Center renovation. Tonight, we continue our focus on the Blazers on and off the court. Veteran Trailblazers reporter Casey Holdahl breaks down the offseason signings the team could make, who are the most likely targets the Blazers could keep this summer. Plus, what do the Blazers mean to the city's economic livelihood? The president and CEO of the Portland Metro Chamber breaks down the business impact of the Blazers in Rip City. And our news partners at Willamette Week weigh in on the Trailblazers' new owners, highlighting key questions and concerns that haven't received as much attention. Let's start with Guillermo and Casey. And the Trailblazers will have to make some decisions this summer on some of their key rotational players.
Yeah, right. Some of those players are Robert Williams III, Matisse Thybulle, and Blake Wesley. We'll get to that in a second. But veteran Blazers reporter Casey Holdahl joins me now. What about that ending? Tell me about that ending just real quick.
Crazy. The fact that neither home team has won a game yet, pretty unusual for an NBA Finals. And I think the way that game played out, I think we've seen a lot in this series that the Spurs have basically given the punch first. The Knicks have taken it and then battled back and then ended up coming out on top. Looked like it was the same thing was going to happen again this time. Once they got it down late in the game, you thought maybe a few things might break New York's way, but this time San Antonio finally able to close out a game. So a pretty interesting one here, and if San Antonio's able to get Game 4, then I mean, I guess it's really a series at that point in time.
Exactly, and it could be an interesting summer for the Portland Trailblazers as well. Let's talk about Tom Dundon and the Trailblazers, just because he said that it's the time to win for this team now. Some of the guys that I just mentioned are free agents. What are some of the possible moves that within the team we could see this summer?
Well, as you mentioned, there are three main free agents for the Trailblazers. They have Robert Williams III, who was their backup center this year, who had a fantastic season. Matisse Thybulle, who missed a lot of the season due to injury, but looked great when he was able to play. And Blake Wesley, who looked fantastic to start the season, had that broken foot, never really worked his way back in the rotation after that. So those three guys right there are free agents going into this offseason for the Trailblazers. I'm sure the team would like to bring all three of those guys back. They all provide something of value. The question is, what kind of offers are going to get on the open market? People might remember Matisse Thybulle was a guy who signed a restricted free agent contract with the Mavs, came back to Portland because the Blazers matched that contract. We'll see if there's kind of interest there to run it back again with Matisse. And then a guy, particularly Robert Williams III, I think the notion being that he's the guy who's had so many injury issues, but he didn't this season. He was able to get through the entire year. A very valuable player as a backup center. Blazers are still going to probably need a backup center. You have Donovan Clingan, but if you assume that Young Hansen will probably not be ready to go to play regular minutes next season, then you also need a backup center for the Trailblazers. Rob Williams is a great locker room guy as well, one of the most beloved players on the team. So it's really a question of whether or not they'll be able to bring Rob back. I would assume there's probably some interest there, but as I mentioned, he's a guy who I think a lot of teams are going to look at, who is probably making less than the mid-level, which is about $15 million a season. And I think a lot of teams, if you're a team that has a backup center need, Robert Williams is a guy that a lot of teams are going to be interested in.
Yeah, a lot of Trailblazers fans think that Robert Williams played in the playoffs out of his current contract. Another team could pick him up. What do you think about that? You think we'll see Robert Williams here in Portland next year?
I'd say it's really a coin flip. If I had to guess, I would say no, because I do think that Rob is probably going to get some offers. Now, the thing about Rob, though, is I know the kind of loyalty and being comfortable is something that's very important to Rob Williams. And I know that he has loved being in Portland. I know he's loved the team. So I think there's probably interest there. It's just whether or not the money is going to be there. And I think with Rob, again, he's a guy who, if he's able to stay healthy, he is a game changer on both sides of the ball, particularly defensively. So a guy who I think there's probably going to be a lot of interest in.
Casey, real quick, what are some of the most probable targets GM Joe Cronin could target this summer?
Well, as I mentioned, the Trailblazers are a team that is over the cap but under the tax, so they'll have the taxpayer mid-level exception, which is a little more than $15 million a season to work with in which to sign free agents. You look at Portland's roster, you look at kind of what do they need. I think the most glaring deficiencies shooting. So I think they're looking for probably a guard forward who can shoot. So you got guys like Kevin Huerter, guys, I mean, if you want to go higher up the list, a guy like Tobias Harris, a guy like John Collins. You know, again, the question is going to be what other teams are going to do as well, because not many teams have cap space. A lot of teams do have the middle-level exception, so it's a lot of teams are going to be fighting over the same players for the same amount of money, which means those players are going to have options based off of what they like best. So it's really going to be about the Trailblazers making that case to potential free agents, because they're going to be fighting with other teams for a lot of those guys.
All right, hoping for the best. Thank you,
Absolutely.
Casey. All right, coming up next on this special edition of Rip City Wrap-Up, the Blazers bring in money for Portland. But what does that actually mean for many of the city's businesses? The CEO of Portland Metro Chamber explains that to us coming up next.
Welcome back to this special edition of Rip City Wrap-Up. A lot's been made about the Blazers' economic impact to the city and the region. By one estimate, the Rose Quarter has a $670 million annual economic impact. A large portion of that is the Blazers, specifically Blazers games. But what's that mean, and what do the Blazers mean to the city's business community? To break that down, we're joined tonight by Andrew Hone, the president and CEO of the Portland Metro Chamber. Thank you so much for being here.
Great to be here.
Let's break down that economic figure. When people hear $670 million of economic impact, what does that mean? That doesn't mean the city and state are getting $670 million, but break down what that means.
That's dollars and cents in generated activity, not just by the Blazers, but by concerts, by events, civic engagements that are happening there. So there's a ton of economic opportunity year in and year out. I want to put this in context, though. It's also about jobs, and the jobs report that just came out last month from the Oregon Employment Department was awful, right? Year on year, Multnomah County is down 8,000 jobs. That's 1.6% lower in our employment. We still have not recovered all the jobs from the pandemic, and so we have a real issue here. And today, our national labor numbers were released, 173,000 jobs were added to the U.S. economy. So Multnomah County is shrinking, losing jobs, and economically distressed. The U.S. economy is still growing, still adding jobs. So when you ask questions like this, we have to put it in the context of where our economy is right now, and it is fragile. And so when we talk about economic activity, $670 million, what is that? That's people's livelihoods, that's food, that's restaurants, that's hotels, that's people taking cars to and from the games. That's just going out and spending resources. We need that here, we need it now, and we need to grow it.
What kind of impact do the Blazers have to the business community more broadly? You mentioned some of the things that people spend their money on when they go to a Blazers game, but the Blazers in general, what do they mean to the city of Portland's business community?
It's so much. I mean, it is, of course, visitor spending, which I think is around $113 million of that. It's a significant amount of resources. That's all the associated media impacts. That's a reputational impact nationally. You know, Portland's been through some tough moments the last few years. And you think, what does it look like when the Blazers are in the playoffs? It looks good. Portland's on the national scene. We see those flyovers of our city. People are like, I want to go check that out. I want to see what's going on here. And then you go past the Blazers, you talk about what does it mean to have a WNBA franchise playing right now? Those are more nights, more activities, more restaurants and bars, more support services that surround teams like that, and then concerts that are drawing people in from all over the region and beyond. So when you ask those questions, it's really about a global impact, not just the dollars and cents that are happening right here, right now. It is about a reputation. It is about the image of this city, and that's priceless.
The team has not explicitly said they will leave. They've not laid that on the table, but it's a concern people have. What concern does the chamber have, and do you have, if that were to happen? What would that mean to the city?
You know, full disclosure, I am a proud Green Bay Packers team owner. I own one share. And something that broke my heart just the other day is the Bears announced they're moving to Indiana. So when people are like, that's not something we should be taking seriously, they need to check their pulse. If the Chicago Bears can play in Indiana, why are people thinking this is not a reality that we're dealing with right now? You know, I was part of the team that brought the New Jersey Nets to Brooklyn. I promise you, every single day before that deal got done, my boss, his boss's boss were all on the phone calling the New Jersey Nets saying, how can we get you in here? And so when people say that's not a reality, it's a reality. It's a reality because we have to create a competitive package, a market package to keep this team here, to modernize the oldest NBA facility in the entire NBA, right? I mean, we're talking about a facility that has not kept pace with the modern needs of the way that these teams play, concerts and performances. It is not up to standards. We deserve a world-class facility so that we can keep our team here, and not just keep the team. That's just what you do if you're a big person city. You keep what you have. What you need to do is talk about how can we grow the opportunities. This is more games. We need more concerts. We need more events and activations around there because that will also unlock the potential of that neighborhood. Let's talk about that neighborhood. Lower Albina, okay, historically divided neighborhood, has the opportunity because of redevelopment that's happening around it. You know what would be really nice to do if you redevelop that neighborhood is to have jobs nearby. We need to complete the Moda Center and we need to redevelop the entire neighborhood so we can have people living there 24/7, live, work, play neighborhood. Both of these things have to happen. So that's a prime directive of our city right now.
And a lot of discussion right now. City Council will ultimately decide what to do with the city's portion of the renovations of Moda Center. Andrew Hone, the President and CEO of the Portland Metro Chamber, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you, Wright.
We'll be back to wrap up the show. G, right back to you.
Thanks, Wright. Coming up, we're joined by our news partners at Willamette Week. Editor Aaron Mesh will talk about the paper's in-depth reporting on the team and its governor, Tom Dundon. We are back with a special edition of Rip City Wrap-Up. Since Tom Dundon took over the Blazers, Willamette Week has been tracking every move. The
media outlet has been covering everything from sweeping layoffs on the business side to the push for $600 million in public funding for the arena renovations. The papers also asked the question Portland fans don't want to think about. Will this team still be here? Willamette Week editor Aaron Mesh has been leading that coverage. He joins us now to break down where things stand. Aaron, thank you for your time tonight.
It's nice to be here.
Thank you, Aaron. In your entire time, your career that you've been covering the Trailblazers, how different has it been this year compared to the rest?
It has been quite the season. It's not every year that the FBI arrests your head coach after opening night. That's been something different. Obviously, Damian Lillard being back in town is an exciting, positive development for the team. And then you have this question that everyone is asking, which is whether or not the new ownership has any commitment to Portland and whether or not the city council is going to actually put taxpayer dollars toward an arena.
When you look at everything that's happened since that new ownership group led by Tom Dundon has taken over, what's the headline? What's the one thing Portland fans need to understand about this ownership group?
Well, the thing to understand about Tom Dundon is that he is essentially a poor billionaire. So he is worth $2.3 billion. And by the standards of billionaires, by the standards of, say, Paul Allen and the Allen estate, that's actually not a lot of money. So his group paid a little over $4 billion for the Blazers. Do the math. He doesn't actually have that money, right? He has to get the governor's group, his co-owners, to come in and help him on that. And he's also had to leverage the Carolina Hurricanes, the team that he owns in Raleigh, in order to be able to afford this deal. He also seems, based on pretty much everything that you read when he talks to anybody, to be an exhausting guy. Just a worker. Well, yes, yes, but also sort of exhausting to work for. Yeah. So, you know, he's a guy who demands that things be printed double-sided. There's just sort of a sense that, like, this is not an easy man, and he's going to drive a hard bargain, and he doesn't have a lot of money, and he likes to save money. He pinches pennies. You know, he also made his fortune in the subprime auto lending business, which is like the one job that is more morally unscrupulous than used car salesman. So that's a question too, although at least we can say that he is not a tech bro. So he's not one of the 12 worst people on the planet. So we have that going for us.
Aaron, we've been covering the Moda Center funding for the first 2 games of the NBA Finals. What are some of your concerns when it comes to this topic, funding the renovation of the Moda Center, that are probably not catching a lot of headlines?
Well, I would point people towards San Antonio, the town that we were just in a couple of nights ago back on Friday night. In San Antonio, they are running headlines like, do the Spurs have a San Antonio problem? In other words, you have a franchise that is like the league model that everyone looks to as the best franchise in the NBA. And they're having a conversation about whether the $500 million, sorry, yeah, that's right, $500 million that they're thinking about putting into an arena deal is in fact not sufficient because the market is so small that the team would be worth more if it were moved to Austin, Texas, or Nashville, Tennessee. Portland has the same problem. Remember that 2 years ago, Ted Wheeler and the city government actually bought the arena back from Paul Allen for $1. That means that the city bought a depreciating asset, and Tom Dundon brought a portable asset, something that he can move to any other city if he wants to. So he has no real ties to the city. And I continue to be sort of impressed by the way that in every interview he's conducted, he has managed to not say one nice thing about the city of Portland.
How real is that relocation threat, and how do you think the Portland city leaders are playing that right now?
I think that it goes away if the city plays ball. He's said on the record, Dundon has, that if the team gets the arena funding that it desires, if it gets a state-of-the-art arena, if it gets $600 million, basically that's the price tag. There's a little bit of a hostage negotiation situation happening here, in which the Blazers are the hostage, and the question is, do we pay the ransom, which is $600 million of tax, all of it taxpayer dollars, some of it city dollars, 300 and something, 385 I believe has already been dedicated to it by the state in taxpayer dollars. If we pay that ransom, we get to keep the team. I wish I could give you happier news than that, but this is sort of the reality that many American cities are dealing with in this age of late capitalism, is that people with a lot of money hold the fate of cities and whether in their hands, and whether or not like there's a heartfelt feeling of attachment doesn't really matter to them.
Aaron, real quick, what is next on this chapter? What are you watching closely in the next couple of weeks or months that will tell the future of the Blazers?
I think it's going to boil down to this question that you've been talking about with counselors over the last few nights. It's going to be this question of whether or not the money that sits in PSEF, should that be dedicated to an arena and to a green arena, or do we need to find a different funding mechanism? I actually think that the most reason for optimism is that most counselors seem to agree that they don't want the worst case scenario to happen. And so what they're doing is trying to figure out a way in which it won't. And the way in which it won't is to figure out how to find that roughly $200 million, $120 million plus between the city and the county is $200 million. So how to find that money. The county knows how they're going to find it. The city is in a debate about how. So it's no longer a question of if, it's a question of how. But that question of how could be where this whole thing falls apart. Because again, there are certain counselors who really believe that that money in PSEF, no matter how much there is, no matter how big that pie expands, can't be touched. And there are other counselors who believe that there's no other money to be found. So that's where the question's going to be.
All right, there you have it. More conversations like this after Game 4 on Wednesday night.
Be sure to stick with KATU News after each game for a special edition of Rip City Wrap-Up. Guillermo and I will have an in-depth look at what's been a busy year for the Blazers, both on and off the court. We'll have special guests talking next steps for Portland and what the coming season could bring with new ownership. In Rip City, there's a lot happening with your Trailblazers, new ownership, an uncertain future, and a $600 million question hanging over Moda Center.
Meanwhile, the Spurs silenced the crowd in Madison Square Garden tonight, stealing a win on the road. Will they even the series with Game 4 versus the Knicks? Plus, veteran Blazers reporter Casey Holdahl joins us again for Game 4 with an insider perspective on where this team is headed. Oregon Senate President Rob Wagner will join us live after approving a plan to renovate the Moda Center. And finally, we will hear from Portland's Mayor Keith Wilson. He will also join us live to talk about the Blazers, new ownership, and of course, what we've been talking about, the Moda Center renovation.
That's a big topic at City Hall. We'll also have our continuing conversations with city councilors. We'll have Councilor Mitch Green on Wednesday as well. So a lot happening, and we're really covering a lot here in this Rip City.
Exactly, and don't miss out. All these conversations live on our YouTube channel. Just search KATU, and they should be on the live tab. But that's all we have for you tonight. Have a great night.